Week that special counsel Jack Smith will resign before Trump is inaugurated in January. But for folks like me, I want to know when Smith's final report on his Trump cases will be made public. Meanwhile, in an absurd decision that will likely face an uphill battle in Congress, Trump indicated this week his choice for Attorney General. That's Congressman Matt Gaetz, a man who once faced a sex trafficking investigation from the same department he could now lead. Joining me now is Barb McQuade, Msnbc legal analyst, former U.S. attorney in Michigan, co-host of the #Sisters-in-Law podcast. And in her free time, she's also a best-selling author of Attack from Within, How Disinformation is Sabotaging America. Barb, look, I've been having these conversations with you, Joyce, and others. This Matt Gaetz nomination is nuts, and we'll get to that in a second. But I did want to ask you, I want to get your take on the Jack Smith stuff, right? I understand he's resigning. I understand his team will resign. But I want to know how likely we are to see a pretty kind of fulsome written report from Jack Smith setting out his analysis on not only the D.C. federal election interference case, but also what is still currently pending on appeal in the 11th Circuit, which is that classified documents case.
Yes, you know, I have heard from a number of people saying, why should Jack Smith pull the plug on his own case? Why not let Trump just fire him, make him go through that exercise so that people can see that it was Trump who ended this? And I think it's because Jack Smith can have a lot more control if he ends it on his own terms. I think there are a couple of things he can do. One, as you say, is to issue a full-throated report on both of the cases, the January 6th election interference case, as well as the documents case in Florida. Those two things. The other thing he could do, Katie, and, you know, I don't know if this would withstand all of the machinations that Trump will certainly try to put up against it, but to dismiss the cases without prejudice, make the argument later that the statute of limitations is tolled during the Trump presidency, and revive the cases in 2029. I think there's a 50-50 shot that succeeds. And so if he ends it now with prejudice, that keeps those cases alive. It would put the Trump administration in the untenable spot of either accepting that or having to refile the cases just so they can dismiss them with prejudice. So we'll see how that goes. But I think this keeps Jack Smith's hands in control rather than leaving it in the hands of the next Department of Justice.
Which would be kind of ironic, right, Barb? Kind of using that OLC idea of non-criminal prosecution of a sitting president, use it as a sword, not necessarily a shield, to be able to force Donald Trump to have to figure that out. One really quick follow-up for you, Barb. Joyce and I had a chance to speak about this on an IG Live the other day. Your thoughts about maybe Smith keeping that 11th Circuit Court of Appeals appeal alive, that classified docs appeal, because that didn't deal with presidential immunity. It didn't deal with that. It actually dealt with the appointments clause for somebody like special counsel Jack Smith.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting situation because the special counsel tool alone is a tool that I think most people, whether you're on the right or the left, thinks is good for democracy, good for the rule of law. It allows an independent investigation of people when there might be a perceived conflict of interest. So regardless of the merits of the case, one of the things that could happen in the next administration is to continue to defend the concept of a special counsel, that those regulations are constitutional. And then if and when the case comes back, they could then dismiss the documents case. So I think that is an interesting option that we'll have to watch and see what happens.
So, Barb, let's talk about Matt Gaetz. You are, I'd call you a career prosecutor. I mean, I know that you're currently not at the U.S. Attorney's Office, but you, like me, have spent a huge chunk of our professional careers as prosecutors. And we have to talk about Matt Gaetz. So an attorney named Joel Lepper telling NBC News, my client testified to the House Ethics Committee that she witnessed Representative Gaetz having sex with a minor at a house party in Orlando in 2017. This testimony was provided to the Ethics Committee in April of 2024. So, Barb, this was just a few months ago. This attorney represents two witnesses, that have provided testimony to the committee regarding Matt Gaetz, and a spokesperson for Matt Gaetz responding saying Merrick Garland's DOJ cleared Matt Gaetz and didn't charge him. Are you alleging Garland as part of a cover-up? Objection that was actually not responsive and actually not even relevant. But, Barb, this idea of having somebody who would head up the United States, the biggest law enforcement division of this country, being the Attorney General. This is not a joke. I mean, I know there's a lot of kind of, chuckles about this insanity, but this is not a joke. This man would be America's top cop.
Yes, it's, joke is an appropriate word, but it almost makes too little of the disdain of Donald Trump that is demonstrated by this appointment. It shows a contempt for the rule of law. It is an insult to the people who have spent their careers working on behalf of victims in this country. It is a spit in the face of people who are victims of crimes. I am hopeful that this is either some sort of ploy just to get Gates out from under his ethics violations, or it is somehow a stalking horse for some other candidate who is awful, but slightly less awful than Matt Gaetz, because there's nothing about Matt Gaetz that makes him qualified for this job. This should be a person of unquestioned integrity. This should be a person who is learned in the law. This should be for a person who has experience as a prosecutor or a lawyer or in a leadership role at the Department of Justice. And Matt Gaetz has none of those things. In fact, what appears to be his strongest criteria is his loyalty to Donald Trump, because he has made it clear that he will take a blowtorch to the Department of Justice. He will accept Donald Trump's request to weaponize the Department of Justice. And so I am hopeful that if there is some sort of confirmation process, that responsible members of the Senate, whether they're Republican or Democrats, will reject this selection.
Barb, what happens to all those line prosecutors? And for those of you that are watching, line prosecutors are the people that are in the trenches day in and day out, trying these cases, dealing with juries, dealing with victims and witnesses and the public. What happens to them? Because the U.S. attorneys themselves, as we know, they can resign and step down once a new president comes in with a new administration. But what about the people that are working for the Department of Justice and they want to be able to continue to fight for the rule of law?
Yeah, this is a tough moment for all of them, and I'm sure there's some out there thinking that this is the moment they need to resign to preserve their own integrity. But my message to them is, please stay. We need people of integrity to be at the Justice Department. And this isn't any deep state theory. This is about protecting the rule of law. So if and when an order comes that is a violation of the rule of law, that is an effort to weaponize the law to go after Donald Trump's political rivals, there are people who are there who are saying, no, we stand up for the rule of law. That's not what we do. We base our cases on facts and evidence and not on partisan politics. So with 110,000 career employees at the Department of Justice, it's going to take a lot, and probably a lot longer than 4 years, to demolish that. But that really depends on the good people of integrity in the Department of Justice staying and standing up for the rule of law.
And keep on looking at that seal, Barb, while you're speaking. It says Department of Justice, and that word justice is still there. Barbara McQuaid, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Katie.
Coming up, clean sweep with a unified Republican government just 65 days away. What, if anything, can congressional Democrats do to get in front of Donald Trump's worst impulses after he sets up shop